Picture a house with walls so thick that in summer the inside stays cold and in winter the cold never fully leaves. Walls the colour of old bone. Walls that have absorbed 60 years of breath, of smoke, of the small sounds people make when they think nobody is listening. Now give that house one window, not a generous window, not a window that lets in the kind of light you're imagining. A window maybe 40 centimetres wide, cut into the north-facing wall, so the sun almost never reaches it directly. A window with wooden shutters that stay half closed even in July because the light, when it comes, brings heat you can't afford, and the heat in Sicily in July is not a warmth. It's a pressure. It's something that sits on your chest. Now give that house no water, no pipe, no tap, no well in the courtyard, nothing. The water lives in a cistern cut into the bedrock under the floor, filled by whatever rain falls between October and April. In April you start rationing. In July, if the winter was dry, you watch the level with the same attention a doctor gives a patient who is not doing well. Now put 3 women in that house, 3 generations of the same family, a grandmother, a mother, and you. The grandmother remembers Garibaldi, not as history. She was a girl when his red shirts came through, and she remembers what followed, which was not the liberation people had hoped for. She remembers exactly what changed and what did not, and she will tell you if you ask, though the telling takes a long time and always ends the same way. The mother remembers a husband. She keeps his photograph on the shelf above the fire, slightly tilted. In a frame she straightened so many times the nail is half loose in the stone. Her husband was underground every morning by 4 and underground until 3, and then dead at 31. The mines took him the way the mines take a lot of men in Sicily. Slowly, then suddenly. You're 14 years old. You arrived in this house the way everyone arrives in this house, born into it, screaming with no say in the matter. This is Sicily. 1926. This is not a travel story. This is not the Sicily of lemon groves and blue water that people write about in books you will never read. This is the interior, the stone-coloured hills where the villages cling to ridges like they're afraid to let go. Where the summer turns the grass to straw in 3 weeks. Where the men who own the land do not live on the land, and the men who work the land do not own it. This is a place where you learn very young that your hands are your only real property. So get comfortable. I make these sleep stories, and honestly I never know if anyone actually falls asleep to them, or if you're all just here because you want to understand what the world looked like before all the things we take for granted existed. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness, not the almost dark of a room with curtains. The real darkness, the darkness that exists inside stone walls in the hour before the sun comes up. The kind of dark where you genuinely cannot see your own hand if you hold it 6 inches from your face. For a half second you don't know where you are. Then the smell finds you, and the smell always knows exactly where you are. The first thing is smoke, not fresh smoke. Old smoke. Smoke that has settled into the stone over years and decades and probably longer. A smell that is so deep in the walls that you could scrub them with sand and river water for a week and not remove it. Underneath that, the animal smell. The house used to have a donkey stabled in the lower room in winter. The donkey died 2 years ago and they couldn't afford to replace it. But the smell of the donkey is still there in the stone. Animals leave themselves behind in stone walls. They seep in. They stay. Then the smell of your grandmother. Rosemary and old wool and something else. something that is simply the smell of a very old woman who's been working her whole life and whose body carries the record of it. Then you, your own smell, which you stopped noticing years ago the way you stopped noticing the sound of the bells from the church at the top of the hill, until one day you notice you stopped noticing and you can't remember when. And then, cutting under everything, the smell that tells you what time it is before any clock would. Bread. Your mother is already awake, already at the fire, already working on the dough she started last night. This is what mornings in this house smell like, every morning. This one and the one before and the one before that, going back further than you can remember. You're lying on a straw mattress on a wooden frame that takes up the left corner of the single room. On the other side of the curtain that divides the room, your grandmother is already not in her bed. You can feel the absence of her, the way you can feel a cold draft, a kind of negative presence. Nonna is never the last one awake, and never the last one up, and in 23 years of living with her, you have never once seen her sleep. Your feet touch the floor. The floor is stone. It is always cold, even in August. The cold comes up through the soles of your feet and into your legs before you've taken 3 steps. You've been doing this your whole life and it still shocks you slightly each morning. That cold, like the house reminding you of what it is. You pull your dress on. In this house there is no privacy for dressing, which stopped mattering at about the same time you stopped being able to remember a time it mattered. You put on the dress, black, because the family has been in mourning in some form or another for years and black hides dirt, and you put on the apron over it, and you go to the window and push back the shutter and look out. The sky over the valley is the colour of charcoal just before it goes fully grey. The house across the narrow street, so narrow 2 people cannot pass without turning sideways, is dark. The house above that, on the slope, also dark. Below you, somewhere in the tangle of stone streets, a dog is barking at something it heard and now can't find. This is the village waking up. Not all at once, in layers, the way a fire catches. First just one coal glowing, then another, then a third, then suddenly it's burning and you can't say exactly when it became burning from just glowing. You close the shutter. 2 centimetres of wood between you and the morning air, which in March is cold enough to make your teeth ache. You're up, your mother says from the fire. Not a question. She heard your feet on the stone. Yes, the water. Those 2 words are not the beginning of a conversation. They are a complete instruction. The water needs fetching. You're old enough to fetch it. Go. The clay jug lives on a shelf beside the door. It is worn smooth by the number of times it has been picked up, set down, filled, carried, set down again. Your hands know exactly how to hold it. At the widest part, 2 fingers through the ear, your palm supporting the bottom. Empty, it weighs almost nothing. Full, it weighs about 12 kilos. You know this because you have carried it full, up the hill from the fountain, twice a day for the past 4 years, since you were 10 and big enough to manage it. Before you, your mother carried it. Before your mother, your grandmother carried it. The fountain is in the piazza, maybe 300 meters from your door. 300 meters does not sound like much. Walk it on a July afternoon with 12 kilos of water in your arms and see how it feels. You open the door onto the vicolo. The alley, though calling it an alley gives it too much credit, it's barely a channel between walls, and you step out into the early morning cold. The smell of the outside is different from the smell of inside. Outside smells like stone and donkey dung and the wood smoke coming from the chimneys where people are already lighting their fires, and underneath all of it, in March, a faint promise of green things. The wild fennel that grows in the gaps between the stones, the almond blossoms that opened 2 weeks ago on the trees in the terraces below the village. You walk. The Vicolo slopes downward, which is useful going to the fountain and terrible coming back. The stones are uneven, worn into troughs and ridges by centuries of feet going in the same direction, and in the dark you navigate them the way you navigate everything in this village, by memory, by the feeling of the ground under your shoes, by a map in your body that doesn't need eyes. You pass the house of Donna Carmela, where a light is already showing through the crack of the shutter. Donna Carmela is always the first woman at the fountain. She has been the first woman at the fountain for 30 years. People say she would rather die than be second. The thought makes you walk a little faster. At the fountain, 3 women are already there. Donna Carmela, naturally, filling her jug with the particular movements of a person who believes efficiency is a virtue. She does not look at you. She never looks at anyone at the fountain. She is not there to socialize, she is there to perform. Next to her, waiting, Pina from the house on the corner. Pina is maybe 25, with a baby on her hip even at this hour, even at the fountain, the baby tied to her with a length of cloth the way all the babies in this village are carried until they can walk. The baby is asleep. Pina looks like she wishes she were asleep. And on the steps beside the basin, sitting with her hands in her lap, doing absolutely nothing, Agnese. Agnese is 12 and was sent to fetch water and stopped to rest on the steps the way she always does. The way she'll keep doing until someone with more authority than you tells her that stopping to rest is for after the water is fetched, not before. Buongiorno, you say? Buongiorno, says Pina, shifting the baby. Donna Carmela says nothing. She's filling her jug. Agnese waves. This is how the fountain works in the morning. You wait your turn, you fill your jug, you carry it home. There are no conversation that hasn't already been had, no news that hasn't already been discussed, no secret that stays secret for more than 48 hours in a village of 300 people. While you wait, you look at the basin. The water is dark in the early morning, the colour of sky without enough light in it. The sound it makes coming through the spout is the sound you've been hearing your whole life. A sound so constant it registers as silence. The way breathing registers as silence until you notice it. The basin is old. The stone around the spout is worn into a hollow by the decades of hands cupped under it. The weight of water, the hands of your grandmother and her mother's mother, all in the same hollow of the same stone. You think about that sometimes. How many hands? Then you stop thinking about it because Donna Carmela has finished and it's your turn. Back at the house, your mother takes the jug from you without comment and pours a portion into the pot over the fire and a portion into the ceramic basin, where you'll wash your face and your grandmother will wash her hands, and various things will be done over the course of the day that require water, small amounts, carefully used, nothing wasted. The bread is almost ready. Your grandmother is sitting in her chair beside the fire, and her hands are moving. They're always moving. Even when Nonna appears to be doing nothing, her hands are doing something. Right now they're mending a sock from the look of it, though the sock has been mended so many times already that the original sock is mostly memory, and the current object is mostly repairs. Your grandmother's hands are the hands of a person who's been working since she was 5 years old and has not stopped. The knuckles are swollen, not dramatically, not the terrible distortion you've seen on some old women in the village, but enough that you can see each knuckle clearly, distinct, like knots in rope. The skin on the back of her hands is thin in the way that old skin gets thin, papery, the veins showing through it blue and raised. The palms are hard, not calloused in the way a man's palms are hard from tools, hard in a different way, hard from the particular combination of cold water and rough cloth, and kneading dough and scrubbing stone floors and all the other work that hands like hers have done when she was your age, 1870 thereabouts. The exact date uncertain because dates were less carefully tracked for girls than for boys. Sicily had just become part of Italy. For about 10 seconds. That was the idea anyway. The reality was somewhat different. She'll tell you about it if you ask. She'll tell you while her hands keep moving, while the needle pulls through the wool, while the fire crackles and the bread bakes and outside the village comes slowly to life. She'll tell you in the particular way of old Sicilian women, which is not the way of a lecture or a history lesson, but the way of someone describing weather. This happened, then this, as if it could not have gone any other way, which perhaps it couldn't. Nonna, you say, the bread is nearly ready. I know, she says, without looking at the fire. 3 more minutes. She always knows. Her relationship with bread is older than your concept of time. The bread comes out of the pot. There is no oven in this house. The bread bakes in a covered iron pot on the coals, and it is dense and dark and smells like the inside of the earth itself. This is not the bread of bakeries. This is not the soft, pale bread that you've seen in pictures of cities, bread that apparently yields when you press it. This bread does not yield. This bread has been worked into existence by your mother's arms, and it has the character of something made by force. There is a resistance to it that is almost personal. You eat it standing. There is a table, technically, but the table is covered with the things that live on the table. The salt box, the oil flask, the ceramic pot that holds the dried herbs, the piece of cloth your grandmother is not currently mending, the letters. The letters live in a cigar box on the table. There are maybe 40 of them now, all from New York, all in the handwriting that you've come to recognize the way you recognize a voice. Your mother's brother Calogero, who left in 1912 and who writes every 3 months, sometimes 4, and who sends money when he can, which is better than never. The letters are in Italian, technically, but an Italian that has been contaminated by New York in ways you can hear even reading them silently. Words that don't belong in Italian, transliterations of English things that have no Sicilian equivalent. A job, il boss, il tenement. You have not been taught to read. Most of the girls in this village have not been taught to read. There is a school, technically, and the law since before you were born says children must go to it. And you went for 3 years when you were 6 and 7 and 8, and you learned enough to make out the words in your uncle's letters, though slowly, though sometimes you have to ask your mother. Your mother reads them aloud to Nonna in the evenings. Nonna doesn't comment until the letter is finished, and then she asks one question, always practical, always the same in spirit if not in exact words. And what does he say about coming back? And the answer is always the same. He doesn't say anything about coming back. The bread goes down without enough else to go with it. There is oil, good oil, Sicilian oil, golden and almost green, and salt. Sometimes there is a preserved olive or 2 from the jar that your mother makes in November from the olives in the grove on the slope below the village. The grove that belongs to the estate, but where the tenants are allowed to gather the fallen olives, the ones that drop before the official harvest, the leftovers. The leftovers, that's the life. The leftovers of a place that produces abundance and exports it, and keeps the people who produce it on the leftovers. Nobody says this out loud. Everybody knows it. The house has one room. This is not unusual. Half the houses in the village have one room. The room is approximately 5 meters by 6. The ceiling is vaulted, stone arched into a curve above your head. The old style, the style that's been the same in this part of Sicily since before anyone can remember. The vault holds heat in winter and cold in summer, and is essentially self-supporting, which is the point, because there is no timber here, no wood for framing, only the stone the village was built from, and the stone the village sits on, and the stone the village sees in every direction. Everything in the room has a place that is also its only possible place. The beds against the 2 walls, the table under the one window, the fire in the corner with the pothooks above it, the shelf where the photograph lives, the chest at the foot of your grandmother's bed, where the important things are kept. The window faces the vicolo on the north side of the house. In summer the north wall stays in shadow from noon onward, which means the house, while never cool, is at least not a furnace. The window becomes the thing through which you track the day, the quality of light changing, the sounds of the vicolo shifting with the hours, the smell of the air carrying information about what the neighbours are cooking, and whether someone down the street is burning wood or dried vine cuttings, and occasionally, rarely, the smell of rain coming over the mountains. The window is the house's single eye, and like most eyes with limited vision, it has learned to see very precisely what it can. You know every sound that comes through that window. The particular creak of Donna Carmela's door, which opens slightly differently from every other door in the vicolo. The sound of the DiMaggio boy kicking a stone down the slope on his way to school, which he does every morning because he is 9 and has not yet been told to stop. The sound of the 3 cats that live in the space between your house and the house next door, whose territorial arguments occur at approximately 2 in the morning, every morning, without fail. You know that the window, in the afternoon, lets in exactly 1 shaft of light in October, a low oblique shaft that crosses the floor at an angle and reaches the leg of the table. In June the sun is too high and the shaft doesn't come through at all. In December it's brief and pale and doesn't reach the table. You learned all of this not because you studied it, but because the window is the most interesting thing in the house, and you have been living with it for 14 years. At 6:30 the bell rings. The church at the top of the hill has bells whose names you've known since before you can remember knowing things. The morning bell is different from the noon bell, is different from the death bell, is different from the feast day bell. You know them all the way. You know the difference between the wind coming from the sea and the wind coming over the mountains. By quality, by something in the body that recognizes before the mind does. This bell means the day begins in earnest. Your mother puts on her headscarf. She's going to the fields. This is what your mother does 6 days of 7, from late winter until the harvest is done. She goes to the fields that belong to the estate, the latifondi, the land that was never divided after unification the way they said it would be divided, that stayed in the same hands it was always in, large parcels, thousands of hectares, owned by men who live in Palermo or Rome and who have not personally seen the land for years. The fields where the braccianti, the day labourers, the arm workers, which is what the word means, arm workers, people who have nothing to offer except their arms, line up in the piazza before dawn and wait to see if the gabellotto will hire them. The gabellotto. This word sits differently in your stomach than other words. The gabellotto is the estate manager, the middleman, the man between the landowner who is absent and the workers who are present. He decides who works and who doesn't. He decides what the work pays. He decides, in a much more immediate way than any distant landowner ever could, what your life looks like. His name is Salvatore Canavo. He is 47 years old. He has a house twice the size of yours with 3 windows and a proper well. He has a horse. He's not a cruel man exactly. He is a practical man. He operates the way the system requires him to operate, which is to say he takes what he needs from above and delivers what is required from below, and in the middle he takes care of himself and his family, which is only reasonable, which is just how it works, which is something everyone understands and nobody says aloud. Your mother goes to the piazza to wait. Sometimes she gets work, sometimes she doesn't. On the days she doesn't, she comes back to the house before 8, and the day becomes a different kind of day. A day of calculations, a day of looking at what's in the house and figuring out which things can wait and which things can't. This morning she gets work. She'll be in the fields until 3. You and Nonna are alone in the house. This is the daily reality of your life, the 2 of you, Generation 1 and Generation 3, with the middle generation out in the fields earning what there is to earn. You have your tasks. You know them the way you know your own name. The floor needs sweeping. It always needs sweeping. Stone floors in a village with no pavement collect a layer of fine grit that comes in under the door and through the window and seemingly through the walls themselves. The bedding needs airing, which means carrying it to the window and draping it over the sill and letting whatever air there is pass through it, which in March is not much, but is something. The pot from the morning needs washing. The bucket near the door needs emptying. Nonna does not supervise you doing these things. She does her own things in the way she has always done her own things, steadily, without rushing, without stopping, with the particular efficiency of a woman who has never had the luxury of wasted motion. She is mending something else now. A shirt of your mother's, a tear along the sleeve. You sweep. The sound of the broom on stone is a sound you've been hearing for as long as you've been aware of sounds. It is the sound this house makes at this time of day, as consistent as the bells. Brush, brush, brush. The grit collecting at the edge of the broom, pushed toward the door, gathered, thrown outside where the wind will deal with it. Nonna, you say. Can I ask you something? You're asking. What was it like before? You stop sweeping. Before everything. Before the mines. Before Papa. A pause. Before America. Nonna is quiet for a moment. Her needle pulls through the cloth. Before, she says, is a long time. Which before? When you were my age. Another pause. Longer. When I was your age, she says, I was already married. She doesn't say this as a complaint or as a warning. She says it as information. The year 1870. She was 15. Her husband was 22. A farmer, a good man by the standards available, a man who worked hard and drank little, and died at 44 of a fever that a doctor in Palermo could have treated, if they had been able to get to Palermo, which they could not. And the land, you ask? The land was the same. She bites the thread, examines the mend. The land has always been the same. The names on the papers change. The church changes whose blessing it asks. The flags on the buildings change. She holds up the shirt, looks at the sleeve. The land doesn't change. She has a way of saying things that sounds like it's the end of the conversation when it isn't. But Garibaldi came through, she says. Very nice uniforms. A small sound that might be a laugh. We thought, all the young people thought, my husband thought. He was a boy then, younger than you. He thought the Northerners were going to give us the land. She sets the shirt in her lap, looks at the fire. They gave us Italy instead, which is not the same thing. She picks up the shirt again. The needle resumes. Italy, she says, means we pay taxes to Rome now instead of to Palermo. Otherwise, she pauses the needle. Otherwise, you finish sweeping, dust the doorsill, take the broom back to its corner. The fire has settled into coals. You add a piece of wood, the wood you collected last Sunday from the slope above the village. Dry, the olive tree branches that fall every year, and that you have gathered since you were strong enough to carry a bundle, which means since you were about 7. The wood catches, pops, sends a small thread of smoke toward the valve in the vaulted ceiling where the smoke is supposed to go, and mostly does go, except when the wind comes from the wrong direction, and then the smoke comes back into the room instead, and fills the house with a hot grey haze that makes your eyes water and your grandmother cough. She coughs anyway, even on the good days. A deep, settled cough. The kind that lives in a chest and doesn't leave. The kind that comes from decades of this fire in this one room. Mid-morning. The light through the window is now white. The particular white of March sunlight in Sicily. Not warm yet, but no longer cold in its quality. You take your mending to the window because the light there is best, and you sit on the stone sill. The wall is 60 centimetres thick, so the window sill is more of a ledge, a place you can sit, and you work. Below you in the vicolo, the life of the morning is happening. The DiMaggio children playing in the 3-metre space between their door and the house opposite. Playing the way children play when the world they live in is all walls, climbing, chasing each other into doorways, inventing games that use vertical space because horizontal space doesn't exist. 2 women talking in the narrow strip of sunlight that reaches the vicolo for about 2 hours in the afternoon when the angle is right. Talking with the particular economy of people who've been talking to each other their whole lives and have refined the language of their conversation to something almost gestural. A man passing with a basket. He nods to the women. They nod back. Nobody stops. This is the village. 300 people on a ridge 400 metres above the valley. The oldest parts of the village, the part where your house is, built when the valley was dangerous, built high for the same reason birds build high, because height means warning, means time. The valley is not dangerous anymore, not in the same way. The brigands your grandmother remembers are gone mostly, or have transformed into something that wears nicer clothes and comes to the village during feast days and is called by a different name. But the village stayed high. People don't move their houses. Below the vicolo, where the slope begins, there is a terrace of almond trees. Not tall trees. Almond trees never get very tall. They spread sideways rather than up, low and gnarled, with the particular twisted personality of things that grow in thin soil with not enough water. The almonds blossomed 2 weeks ago, and the blossoms are going now, brown at the edges, the petals drifting when the wind comes through. Below the almonds, the terraces of the valley, tiny fields cut into the slope with dry stone walls, each wall built by hand over decades and generations to keep the thin layer of soil from washing away in the rains. Wheat in some of them, beans in others, the grey-green of olive trees on the steeper slopes where nothing else grows. Below all of that, barely visible from this angle, the riverbed, dry. The river runs in winter, usually, sometimes in spring, but by now, March, it's down to a trickle, and by May it'll be gone. This is not unusual. This is just what rivers in the interior of Sicily do. Everything here is about managing scarcity. The soil, thin, precious, protected by the walls. The water, rationed, carried, stored, watched. The wood, gathered by hand, burned carefully, nothing wasted. The food, measured, preserved, stretched. The abundance of this land, the almonds, the olives, the wheat, the sulphur under the earth, all of it goes somewhere else. And what stays is this, the stone house, the one window, the clay jug. You know this. You've always known this, in the wordless way that children know the shape of their world before they have words for it. But at 14, you're starting to know it differently, to feel it in the chest rather than just in the body, to ask questions that don't have comfortable answers. At noon the bell rings. Nonna puts down her mending. She's been at it for 4 hours without stopping except to turn the shirt over and start on a different section. Her hands have not slowed. They will not slow until she goes to bed tonight. Come, she says. You follow her to the fire. The bean soup that has been cooking since this morning is ready. Beans from last autumn's harvest, dried and kept in the cloth bag that hangs from the ceiling to keep the mice away, soaked yesterday, cooked slow. Seasoned with wild herbs that Nonna gathers herself in the spring from the slopes. Oregano, thyme, the mountain savoury that grows between the rocks. The soup is thick, almost a paste. You eat it with the bread, breaking the bread into the bowl, letting it soak. It fills you in the solid, unceremonious way that this kind of food always fills you. Not with pleasure exactly, though it's not unpleasant. It's warm and salty and your body wants it, but with something more fundamental, the satisfaction of a need being met. You eat. Nonna eats. Between you, the fire. Outside the window, the vicolo is quiet in the noon hour. The village rests in the middle of the day the way all Mediterranean villages rest, not from laziness, but from long experience with the sun, which at noon in Sicily is not your friend. The cistern, your grandmother says, without looking up from her bowl. Check it. You put down your bread. The cistern access is under a flat stone in the floor near the door, a stone that looks exactly like every other stone in the floor, except that it has a small iron ring set into one edge. You lift it. This smell that comes up is cold and slightly mineral, the smell of water that has been sitting in stone for months. You take the measuring stick, a piece of reed marked with notches your mother made when she put it in, each notch representing 20 litres, and lower it carefully. The stick comes back up. You count the notches. 3. 3 notches from the bottom. That means 60 litres, maybe a bit more if it's been sitting. You take the stick back to Nonna and hold it up. She looks at the wet mark. A pause. 6 weeks, she says, not asking, deciding. 6 weeks of water in the cistern if you're careful, if you stretch it. If the rains come in April, which they usually do but didn't last year, or the year before last year very much, the spring that put the village into a real crisis. The spring when the women were walking 40 minutes each way to the spring at the base of the mountain for months, and some families were buying water from the cart that came from the town in the valley below. 6 weeks. Nonna sets down her bowl, picks up her mending. 60 litres is not a crisis. Not yet. but she's thinking about it. You can see her thinking about it the way you can see a person calculating without them moving a muscle. Something behind the eyes doing the work. Your mother comes home at 3. You hear her in the vicolo before the door opens. Her walk. The particular rhythm of it. Exhaustion in the step, but not defeat. She has been doing this for 6 years, since your father died, since you were 8, and her body has learned to carry it. She opens the door. She brings the smell of the fields with her. Earth and wheat straw and the particular damp smell of clothes that have been sweated through and dried in the sun and sweated through again. Her headscarf is grey with dust. There's dirt under her fingernails that won't come out tonight, that will require the rough pumice stone to work at, and even then. She pours water from the jug, carefully, not much, into the basin and washes her hands and face. The water in the basin turns pale brown. She looks at you, looks at Nonna. The cistern? She asks. Nonna holds up 3 fingers. Your mother dries her face on the cloth, nods once, and that is the entire conversation about the cistern. 3 people, 3 generations, standing in one room with one window, and the information, 60 litres, 6 weeks, begin rationing now, passes between them without another word. Tuesday. The Gabalotto comes on Tuesdays. This is not a surprise. He comes every second Tuesday, and this is the second Tuesday, and for 2 days you've known he was coming the way you know a weather change is coming. Not because anyone told you, but because the house feels different. Your mother moves more carefully. Your grandmother speaks less. The space around the door gets tidied. Canova arrives at 2. He doesn't knock. He opens the door and steps inside in the manner of a man who's been doing this long enough that knocking would be an unnecessary formality. He's in his 40s, of medium height, heavier than the men who work in the fields, with a thick dark moustache, and the clothes of someone who makes a point of dressing better than the people he visits. He has a notebook. He always has a notebook. Rosaria, he says. Your mother's name. Don Salvatore, your mother says. The title is important. The Don is important. It means a particular kind of respect, which in this context means a particular kind of deference, which means a particular acknowledgement of who has the power in this room. Your grandmother does not look up from her mending. Canavo looks around the room in the manner of a man who is not particularly interested in what he sees, but considers looking a professional obligation. His eyes pass over the shelf, the beds, the table, the window. His eyes pass over you and do not stop. You're standing near the window. You stay near the window. The rent, he says. Your mother goes to the chest at the foot of Nonna's bed. She has the money ready. She always has it ready when he comes, has been counting it and recounting it for 3 days, has made absolutely certain she has the right amount, because having the right amount is the floor below which things become very complicated. She puts the coins on the table. He counts them. He's not slow about counting them, and he is not fast. He is thorough. Each coin turned over in his fingers before it goes to the other side of his hand. You watch his hands. You've spent a lot of time watching Canavo's hands. They are the hands of a man who does not do physical labour, smooth-palmed, the nails trimmed. They are the hands of a man who does a different kind of work. The count is correct. He writes something in his notebook. And then, because he's a practical man, and because Tuesday visits have a shape to them that everyone in the village understands, he says, "The Russo boy." A pause. You don't move. Your mother keeps her face still. Your grandmother's needle pauses and then resumes. The Russo boy is 16. He was found 3 weeks ago with a pamphlet. A socialist pamphlet. The kind that has been showing up in various places since the fascists came to power, and that everyone who finds is supposed to turn in. He didn't turn it in. Someone saw him with it. I heard, your mother says. His father is not happy, Canavo says. This is information delivered in a particular way, not as gossip, but as a note about the landscape. The landscape has changed here. There is a new feature on the landscape. Note it. The carabinieri asked questions. Your mother says nothing. Canavo puts his notebook away. He looks at the shelf, at your father's photograph, at nothing in particular. The Fascio, he says, the local fascist organisation. They're organising a census. All households. We know, your mother says. Good. He moves toward the door. He stops with his hand on the latch, looks back into the room. He looks at you. How old? He asks. 14, your mother says. He nods, as if calculating something that doesn't need to be said aloud. He leaves. Your mother waits until the sound of his footsteps in the vicolo fades before she lets her shoulders down. A small movement, a releasing. Your grandmother has not stopped mending. What does he want to know my age for, you ask? For the census, your mother says. That's all. A pause. Your mother pours water into the pot, begins preparing the evening meal. The question you asked hangs in the air of the room, the way smoke hangs in the room after the door's been opened and closed, slowly dissipating but not gone. You know what it means. At 14, especially for a girl, especially in Sicily, especially in 1926 when the fascists are making speeches about the importance of Italian families and the reproduction of the Italian people. Being 14 and female and noticed by a man like Canavo means a category has been applied to you, a category with futures attached. Your grandmother looks at you over the sock she's mending. Come here, she says. You go. She takes your hand in both of hers. Her grip is stronger than you expect every time, stronger than hands that look like that have any right to be. She turns your hand over, looks at your palm. Work hands, she says, like mine. She traces the base of your fingers where the skin is beginning to harden. Good. 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 She releases your hand, picks up her sock. Soft hands are for women who belong to other people. Hard hands are your own. She says this and goes back to mending as if she hasn't just given you the thing you'll carry for the rest of your life. The letters from America. Your uncle Calogero is 3 years older than your mother. He left on a ship from Palermo in 1912, the same year you were born, which is a coincidence your mother finds meaningful, and your grandmother finds neither meaningful nor meaningless, simply a coincidence. He went to New York, to a neighborhood called East Harlem, where there are apparently so many Sicilians that you can spend a week without speaking Italian that isn't Sicilian dialect. He works in construction. He has a wife, an Italian woman from Calabria, which Nonna receives as a slight imperfection, but acceptable, and 2 children you've never met. He sends money 4 times a year, sometimes more. The amounts are unpredictable, which is itself information. Some months his construction job is busy, some months it isn't. The money arrives as a postal order, which your mother takes to the post office in the town in the valley and exchanges for lire. The exchange isn't good. Something is lost in the transaction, but what arrives is still more than most of your neighbours see in the same period. He also sends letters. The letters your mother reads aloud, the letters you know by heart. The most recent one, from November, The envelope crinkled from being handled many times, describes a winter in New York that sounds so different from winter in Sicily that it almost seems fictional. Snow, but not like the snow that sometimes falls on the mountain above the village and comes down to the edge of the terraces and is gone in 2 days. Snow that accumulates. Snow that stays for months. Snow that you have to shovel out of the path to your door, out of the street, off the roof. In America, Calogero writes, "In the careful block letters of a man who learned to write after childhood, you can die of the cold if you're not careful, but you can also die of eating too much, which is a better problem to have." Your mother laughs when she reads this part. Not a big laugh, a quiet one, surprised. "There is talk," he writes, "of more restrictions on immigration. The Americans want fewer Italians. They have always wanted fewer Italians, which is interesting since they want very much the things that Italians build, but the law is coming, and if you want to come, you should come soon." Your mother folds the letter. She puts it back in the box. She and Nonna look at each other. This look contains a conversation that has been happening for years. You've seen this look so many times that you know its components. Your mother's careful hope, which she keeps carefully contained because hope in this family is a resource you don't squander. And your grandmother's refusal, not aggressive, not even particularly emotional, just the refusal of a woman who is 70 years old and for whom leaving the stone house where she has spent her entire life is simply not available as a concept. "She could come," your mother says, meaning you. "She's 14, Nonna says. 14 is old enough." "Old enough for what?" Nonna asks. And in this context, the question is not rhetorical. It is real. Old enough to cross the ocean alone, old enough to live in New York with a man you've met once in your life and his Calabrian wife, old enough to leave your mother, your grandmother, the only house you've ever known, the smell of the stone walls and the weight of the clay jug. To have a future, your mother says. And now the room is quiet, not the comfortable quiet of routine, the difficult quiet of something that needs to be decided and hasn't been, the sulphur. This is where your father went. The Zolfatare, the sulphur mines, are in the centre of the island, in the low hills south of where you live. The landscape there is different. Yellow, lunar. The earth stained with the mineral deposits that make Sicily valuable to a Europe that needs sulphur for matches, for gunpowder, for fertilizer, for the 100 industrial processes that define modernity. Your father went when you were 3. Not because he wanted to, because the harvest failed 2 years in a row and the money ran out and the mine was the option. The mine was always the option when the other options disappeared. The mine paid, not well, not safely, but it paid. He worked 6 months underground the first year, came home in April smelling of sulphur and thinner than when he had left, with a new cough that your grandmother recognized the way she recognized the sound of bad weather coming. He came home again at Christmas, and then in February of the following year, the year you were 5, the year you remember only in fragments, the colour of his coat, the sound of his boots on the stone steps, the way he smelled, which was different from how everyone else smelled, he went back. In April the news came. A collapse in a lower gallery. 4 men. The mine owners sent a payment. A sum so small it was almost an insult, except that insulting it would have meant refusing it, and refusing it was not a thing your mother could afford to do. His name is on the photograph on the shelf. You look at his face every day. He looks like someone you should know. His hands in the photograph are folded in his lap. They are big hands. You have his hands, your mother tells you sometimes. Looking at them, the photograph is small and slightly out of focus in the way that photographs of people who cannot afford good photographs always are. You can almost feel the weight and roughness of hands like that. He was 31. The mine is still operating. This is what Canavo does not say when he looks at you. This is what is in the calculation behind his eyes. A household with no man. A widow and an old woman and a girl of 14. In this calculation, the mine is one possibility. America is another. Marriage is a third. March becomes April. The rain comes twice in April. Not generously. 2 days the first time, 1 day the second. But enough to refill the cistern to halfway, which means you have brought yourself into summer, with more certainty than you had before. You carry the water from the fountain. You sweep the floor. You do the mending. You help your mother in the kitchen garden at the back of the house, a small terraced space, barely 15 square meters, where she grows the vegetables, tomatoes, aubergines, peppers, zucchini, the things that do well in this climate, in this soil with minimal water. The garden is the most alive part of your life, in the literal sense. Everything in the house is stone and wood and cloth and old things. The garden is new things, things that grow and change from week to week. You spend more time in the garden than is strictly necessary for a girl with other tasks. Nonna knows this. She says nothing about it. The feast of the patron saint, June 13th, San Giovanni. This is the one day in the year when the village stops being about scarcity and becomes about abundance, or at least about the performance of abundance, which is not the same thing but serves some of the same functions. The preparations start 3 days before. The women make the sweets, the particular Sicilian sweets that exist in the overlap between Arab and Norman and Greek and Spanish influences, sweets that are made from ingredients, almonds, honey, pistachios, candied pumpkin, that are grown in this island and have been combined and recombined for centuries into forms that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Your mother makes the almond biscuits. She's been making them since she was your age, watching your grandmother, and now your grandmother sits in the chair and advises while your mother measures the almonds and the sugar and the beaten egg whites, and you watch your mother the way she watched your grandmother. The almond paste is sticky and fragrant, and the work of making it, grinding the almonds, mixing by hand in the stone bowl, rolling and cutting, is a physical effort that takes the whole afternoon. The kitchen on these days smells extraordinary, a sweetness that cuts through the usual smell of smoke and old stone, that fills the house so thoroughly you can smell it in the bedroom, which is the same room through the curtain. You steal an almond and get your hand lightly slapped. The feast is in 3 days, your mother says. I'm checking the quality. She tries not to smile, doesn't entirely succeed. This is the other side of life in this house, the side that is easy to miss if you're looking only at the hardship. The 3 of you in this small room making sweets for a feast. Nonna's hands moving over the surface of the biscuits, shaping them. She can do this by touch. She doesn't need to look. While your mother manages the fire and you do whatever is needed, whatever task surfaces. Outside, in the other houses in the Vicolo, the same scene is repeating. The whole village making sweets on the same days, from the same recipes, with the same ingredients, in the same order they've been doing it for as long as anyone can remember. There's something in this. Something about the continuity of it. You think about the hands in the stone of the fountain. All those hands, and now your hands sticky with almond paste, the feast day itself. The church bells begin at 5 in the morning and don't stop until 10 at night. And this is not the considered, measured ringing of the regular bells. This is celebratory ringing, the bells doing something exuberant and slightly chaotic, layering over each other in a way that's joyful and overwhelming and exactly right for the occasion. The procession goes out from the church at 10. The statue of San Giovanni, large, gilded, carried on a platform by 8 men, moves through the main street of the village at a walking pace, surrounded by the priest and the altar boys and half the village walking behind. The women in their best clothes, black most of them, but with the good shawl, the embroidered one brought out for this day, the men with their hats in their hands. Your mother and grandmother and you are in the procession. Your grandmother walks without any sign of difficulty. You've never seen her slow down for anything, and you don't expect to see it today. The main street, the only street wide enough for the procession barely, is decorated. The windows of the houses have the good curtains in them, the ones that only come out for feast days. There are paper flowers made by the women in the weeks before tied to the balconies. The smell of incense from the priest's censer mixes with the smell of the food being prepared in every kitchen in the village. After the church, the feast. The tables are set up in the piazza. This is the one day that the piazza functions as a communal dining room. There is food, pasta, real pasta, not the bean soup and bread of normal days, but pasta al forno, baked pasta, layered with meat and eggs and pecorino, a dish that exists on other days only in theory, in the understanding that it could be made if the ingredients were available. Today the ingredients are available. Every family has contributed. Every family has given something. The pasta itself, the meat, the eggs, the cheese, and what comes back from the communal pot is more than any of them could have managed alone. This is the math of community. It's not charity. It's collective cooking, collective eating. The same principle that built the terraces in the fields, that shares the communal oven, that means when someone's cistern runs dry they can use their neighbour's. You eat until you are full. This is not something that happens often. The feeling of actual fullness, not just enough to function, not the careful sufficiency of managed scarcity, but the surplus feeling, the feeling of having more than you need. It is good. Your grandmother eats. Not much. She has not eaten much for years, and this does not seem to reduce her. But she eats the almond biscuits that she shaped with her hands, and she has a glass of wine, and she sits in the sun in the piazza with the other women of her generation. You watch her sitting there. She is talking to another woman, the same age, maybe older, also small and dark-clothed and fine-boned. They are talking the way old women talk, the particular shorthand of people who have known each other for 60 years, who have watched each other's children grow and their husbands die and the governments change and the seasons turn and the almonds blossom and drop and blossom again. They are telling a story. You can tell by the movement of their hands. Everything in this world is told with the hands. Evening of the feast day. The procession goes back to the church. The statue is returned to its place. The tables are cleared. The children who have been running through the piazza for 6 hours gradually collapse and are collected by parents and carried home. The village returns to itself, but not quite. On feast days there is a residue, a lightness that lingers into the evening, and almost permission to sit outside and talk, to stay up later than usual, to treat the night as something other than the time between finishing work and starting the next day. You sit on the step outside the door with your grandmother. The air has cooled. The stars are out, a sky full of them, the sky of a place with no electricity, the stars coming all the way down to the ridgeline, dense and close. Nonna, you say. In the piazza today? Hmm? There was a man, talking to the priest and Canavo, a man I didn't recognize. Your grandmother is quiet. Young man, you continue. Good coat. He wasn't from here. No, your grandmother says. He's from Agrigento. He works for the government. A pause. The fascists. The government, she repeats. The distinction she's making, or refusing to make, is intentional. You think about the Russo boy and his pamphlet, about the Carabinieri asking questions. The new government has been in power for 4 years, long enough that it's starting to feel like permanence rather than emergency, long enough that the posters on the wall of the post office, the ones with the particular bold angular lettering, feel like they've always been there, long enough that certain conversations are now had only inside, only in whispers, only between people you have known your whole life. Nonna, you say, what happens if... Shh, she says, not harshly, just as a fact. Like, such is the correct response to the sentence you are about to start. You stop. The stars are out. The village is quiet. Your grandmother takes your hand in the dark and holds it. Her grip, that surprising grip, the grip of someone who has been working since she was 5 years old and has not stopped. And the stars above the valley, and the sound of somewhere nearby a child still awake laughing at something. In the morning, she says, the water needs fetching. I know. And the garden needs checking. The zucchini, I know. A pause. Good, she says. She releases your hand, stands. The small, certain motion of it she makes standing look like something she'd decided to do rather than something her body requires, and goes inside. You stay on the step for a few more minutes. You look at the stars. You try to understand your life, where it ends, what its edges are, the stone house behind you, the vicolo leading to the fountain, the terraces going down the slope, the riverbed that's dry, the mountains, the valley, the sea somewhere beyond the mountains, not visible from here but known because on clear days you can smell it, faint and salt dark on the right wind, and, beyond the sea, New York. You try to imagine it and you can't. The photographs you've seen in the newspaper, the one newspaper that comes to the post office and that you've been allowed to look at, don't help. Everything in those photographs looks too large. The buildings taller than anything you have context for, the streets wider, the crowds denser. You try to put yourself in those photographs and you can't find a place to stand. You go inside. July arrives like an argument. The heat in July in the interior of Sicily is not gradual. It's sudden, like a hand coming down. 3 days into July and the sky is white by noon, not blue, and the stones of the house are hot to the touch by mid-morning and stay hot until 2 in the morning. The house becomes a survival strategy. The shutters stay closed from 9 until 5. The door stays open a crack for cross-ventilation, though there's very little air to cross, and the stone walls, which have been cool since March, now give back their coolness as slowly as possible, like a bank paying out a loan it never wanted to make. You do the water run at 6 in the morning before the heat starts, and again at 6 in the evening when it's beginning to lift. The fountain in July has a different social geography than the fountain in March. In March there are a handful of women, early risers, moving efficiently. In July there are more, everyone adjusting their schedule to avoid the worst hours, and the fountain itself, cold, always cold, the spring under the mountain feeding it from a depth where the temperature stays the same year round, is a social necessity. You go there and you stay a few minutes longer than the water requires, standing near the basin where the air is fractionally cooler, where the sound of the water falling into the stone is a relief in itself. At the fountain in July, you learn things. You learn that Pina from the corner house is expecting another child, which nobody's saying directly, but which the shape of her is saying clearly enough. You learn that the young man from Agrigento, the one who came on the feast day, has been back twice, staying at the house of the Gabellotto Cannavo. You learn that the harvest this year looks thin. The rain was good in April, but then stopped, and the wheat on the lower terraces is short-stemmed, not filling out the way it should. You learn that 3 families from the village above yours have applied for emigration papers. This last piece of information spreads through the fountain conversation with a particular weight. 3 families. People don't usually go in groups. Usually one man goes first, and then sends money back, and then sends for the others. 3 families at once means something different. Means a calculation has been made. Means something has happened, or is about to happen, that makes leaving worth the disruption of everything leaving involves. You don't ask what the calculation is, you already know. The week the water runs short, it comes in August. The cistern, checked daily now, the measuring stick coming up a little lower each day, reaches the last notch. Less than 20 litres. 3 days, maybe 4 if you're careful, and no rain in the forecast. The sky has been cloudless for 6 weeks, the relentless blue-white of Sicilian August, the kind of sky that's beautiful and merciless, and that you have learned to read the same way you've learned to read everything, practically, with an eye for what it means. What it means is, you need more water. This spring at the base of the mountain, this is the last resort. Not because it's far, 40 minutes each way, but because the road down is steep, and the road back is steep, and the road back you're carrying 12 kilos of water, and the sun is somewhere above you doing its work. Your mother goes in the morning. She's back by 9, the jug heavier with the effort, her shirt dark with sweat. She fills the cistern, not completely. It's 1 jug, but enough to buy a few days. She goes again in the afternoon, and again the next morning. You go with her on the 3rd day. The path down the mountain is a mule track, the stone worn smooth by centuries of feet and hooves and water, cut into the hillside in a series of switchbacks that make the descent manageable and the ascent brutal. Your grandmother does not come. You don't say this. You don't acknowledge it directly. But the morning when your mother says, "I'll go to the spring today," and looks at you rather, then at Nonna, this is a new arrangement, a slight realignment. Nonna's ankles, which have been swelling in the heat, the track which requires a particular confidence in your footing. Nonna watches you leave from the doorway. Her face is still. She holds the door with one hand. The path descends. The mountain above the village is not dramatic. No sheer faces, no dramatic heights. But it's not gentle either. The rock is grey limestone, the same limestone the village is built from, and the scrub that grows in its crevices is the particular dry, aromatic scrub of places where water is always just barely enough. Wild rosemary, euphorbia, these spiny cushions of thorny plants whose names in dialect are one thing, and in Italian another, and whose job in the ecosystem is apparently to scratch anyone who gets too close. You walk behind your mother. You watch the way she moves on this path. Certain, economical, no unnecessary movement. The same efficiency as her hands when she mends, as her eyes when she reads prices at the market. A woman who wastes nothing because she can't afford to waste anything. She could have been something else. This occurs to you not for the first time, but with more force than usual. Here, on this path, with the sun already pressing down and the village getting smaller behind you. She could have been. What exactly? You're not sure. You don't have a full vocabulary for what she could have been. You know what the options are in your world. Wife, widow, daughter, mother, worker. The categories are clear, and they are not large. But the woman in front of you moving down this path is moving the way a different kind of life would move if it had been given to her. You carry the empty jug. The spring is in a grove of oleanders, pink-flowered and toxic. Every child in every village in Sicily knows oleanders are deadly, knows it before they know their multiplication tables. And the water comes out of the rock in a steady thin stream into a stone basin built into the cliff face. The water is cold, genuinely cold. Cold in a way the cistern water isn't, direct from the rock, smelling faintly of minerals, tasting of something ancient and clean. You fill your jug. Your mother fills hers. The weight settles onto your arms. You turn and start back up the path. This is where you understand the body differently. The weight of 12 kilos of water, distributed through a clay jug, held in front of you with both hands, your arms beginning to burn by the second switchback, your legs adjusting to the uphill with the added load, the sweat starting at your hairline and working down. The dust of the path rising slightly with each footstep and settling on your arms, on your shoes, on the damp surface of your clothes. The sun. At 10 in the morning in August in Sicily, the sun is not something you reason about. It's something that exists above you, the way the stone exists around you, without intention, without malice, simply as a fact you must account for. You put your head down. You walk. Your mother is ahead of you, moving at a pace you match but barely. She does not slow for you, and you don't ask her to. You understand this is not cruelty. It is the only way to get up the path with a jug of water before the sun turns it into something you genuinely cannot do. Halfway up, the point where the path turns back toward the village, and for a moment you can see everything. You stop. You shouldn't stop. The jug is heavy and stopping makes starting again harder, but you stop. The valley below is spread out like something deliberate, like something made to be seen from exactly this angle, at exactly this height. The terraces step down the slopes in their dry stone frames, golden now in August, the wheat already cut, the stubble pale and geometric. The riverbed, dry, completely dry, a white scar through the middle of the valley floor. The village on the ridge above, the stone houses bunched together at the top, the church tower rising from the middle of them, and beyond the village, behind it, the mountains continuing upward into the haze, grey and blue, and then just blue, and then the sky. You have lived here your whole life, and you have seen this view, versions of it from different angles, your whole life. It still does something to you. The world is big. That's what it says from up here. This view. The world is much larger than the 5x6 stone room that contains the three of you. Larger than the vicolo, larger than the piazza where the feast is held, and where the gabalotto makes his calculations, and where the man from Agrigento stands talking to the priest. This valley and these mountains and whatever is beyond them. Come, your mother says. She hasn't stopped. She's a full switchback above you now, her jug on her hip, her back straight. You hoist your jug, you climb, home. The cistern refilled, both jugs poured in, the measuring stick showing just past the third notch. 4 days, maybe 5. Nonna takes your jug from you without asking. She pours water from it into the washing basin and hands you the cloth, and you wash the dust and sweat from your face and neck and arms. The water is cold on your skin. You understand, in a way that is entirely physical, why water is the thing you measure, why the cistern is the conversation that happens in looks and fingers rather than words, why the measuring stick with its notches is one of the most important objects in this house. Water is not a convenience here. Water is not something that comes from a pipe when you need it. Water is the difference between the house working and the house not working, between the beans cooking and not cooking, between the floor being swept and not swept, between your face being clean and not clean. Water is the thing your grandmother's hands have been carrying for 65 years. You dry your face on the cloth. You sit down. Your legs ache in the particular deep way that legs ache after physical effort. Not the sharp surface ache of a cut, but the bone-adjacent ache of muscle that has been asked to do something strenuous and has done it. Your arms are the same. The weight of the water still present. Ghost weight, the body remembering the load. Nonna sets a cup of water in front of you. Plain water, cold from the cistern. In a chipped ceramic cup that has been in this house for decades. You drink it. September. The harvest comes down. The actual harvest, the olives, the almonds, the grapes on the estate, happens in stages, starting in September and running through November. And this is the time of year when the village reconfigures itself around the work. The braccianti work longer hours. Your mother leaves earlier and comes home later, and when she comes home she smells of the particular smell of olive leaves, dry, faintly medicinal, the smell of a plant that has learned to survive drought by refusing to need water. The children who are old enough to help go into the fields. The children who are too young are watched by the grandmothers while their mothers are gone. You're 14, and your job during harvest is dual. Part of it is the field work. Some days your mother takes you to the terraces, where the estate's workers are gathering the almonds, the late ones, the ones that stay on the trees past August, and you work beside her, your hands moving through the branches, feeling for the almonds that have dried and cracked their outer shell, pulling them, putting them in the cloth bag hung at your waist. The motion of almond picking is specific and repetitive, and after the first hour your fingers find the pattern without thought. Reach, close, pull, release. Reach, close, pull, release. Your eyes ahead and your hands knowing what to do independently. The skin between your fingers gets scratched by the dry branches. Small cuts, barely cuts, more like abrasions that sting when the sweat gets into them. By evening the bag is full and your arms are heavy and your fingers are tender and the scratches on your hands and forearms are a map of the day. The other part of your harvest job is the communal preparation. The almonds and olives that come into the village, the portion the tenants are allowed to keep, the portion that falls before the official harvest, the portion that's given as partial payment for labour, need to be processed. The almonds are shelled, dried, stored. The olives are salted or pressed. This work happens in the houses, in the evenings, while the men and children sleep. The women working by firelight. Your grandmother presides over the olive salting. This is something she is expert in. The particular ratio of salt to olive. The piercing. Each olive must be pierced before salting. A small cut to let the salt in. And Nonna does this with a tool she's had since before your mother was born. A wooden handle with a steel tip, 1 pierce per olive. Exactly the same depth each time. Thousands of olives over the course of an evening. Pierce, salt, jar. Pierce, salt, jar. The smell of the fresh olives is complex, bitter, green, with a fatty undertone that becomes something else when the salt draws the moisture out. It's not entirely pleasant, not entirely unpleasant. It's the smell of a thing in process, a thing being changed from what it is into what it will be. You help with the piercing. Your grandmother watches the depth of your pierce. Less deep, she says once. You go too deep, the olive splits. Too shallow, the salt doesn't penetrate. You adjust. She watches. Better, she says. This is instruction in this house. One observation, one correction, one acknowledgement. Then you're expected to have understood. Most of the time you do. The man from Agrigento comes a second time. Not on a feast day, not on a Tuesday with Cannavo. He comes on an ordinary Thursday afternoon in late September, when the sky is finally starting to soften from its summer severity to the more bearable blue of autumn. You're at the table mending when you see him in the vicolo through the window. He's walking with deliberation, not like someone exploring, someone who knows where they're going. He's dressed the same as the feast day, the good coat, though it's warm enough that the coat is over his arm rather than on his back. He stops in front of your door. You look at your grandmother. She's looking at the door. The knock, when it comes, is the knock of someone who has been told to knock 3 times, measured. Your mother is in the fields. Your grandmother gets up. The man at the door is perhaps 30. Dark-haired, a narrow face, the eyes that look at everything quickly, collecting, filing. He has a briefcase. Buonasera, he says. Is this the house of... He glances at a paper. The family Amato. Yes, grandmother says. She does not move from the doorway. I'm making the census, he says. May I come in? A beat. Your grandmother steps back from the door. He comes in. He looks around the room in the way Cannavo looks around the room, assessing, but with different things being assessed. Cannavo looks at the room for its payment capacity. This man looks at it differently. He's looking at whether it matches a category. He opens his briefcase. He takes out a form. Names, he says. Your grandmother gives the names, slowly, clearly, the way you'd give information to someone you're not sure will use it well. Her name, your mother's name, your name, ages. He writes them down. Employment. Bracciante, your grandmother says, for your mother. Day labourer. And yourself? A pause. I manage the household, she says. He writes. The girl. He looks at you. She attends school? She attended school, your grandmother says. She doesn't currently. She helps with the household and with the harvest. The man writes something. You can't see what he writes. Are there men in the household? No. Another note. Male relatives? My son. He's in America. When did he emigrate? 1912. He writes for longer this time. Your grandmother's hands through all of this are in her lap. Still. She has stopped mending. The only time she stops doing something is when she needs both eyes free and both ears open, when she needs her attention undivided. The family has no male head, the man says, not as a question, as a note he's making. The family has what it has, your grandmother says. The man looks at her. She looks at him. He drops his eyes first. He writes something else. The fascist organisation in the village, he begins. We know our obligations, your grandmother says. Another pause. Of course. He caps his pen. He closes his briefcase. He stands. There's no chair to offer him, and he didn't ask for one, and you notice he didn't notice there was no chair offered. which tells you something about him, about where he comes from, about what he's used to. Grazie, he says at the door. Your grandmother doesn't answer. He leaves. The sound of his steps in the vicolo. Regular. Retreating. Your grandmother goes back to her chair and picks up her mending. She doesn't say anything. You wait. Nonna, you say finally. What does the census do with the information? It knows, she says. Knows what? Who is where? What they have. What they don't have. She pulls the needle through. The government likes to know these things, and then it decides what to do about them. This is everything and nothing, a complete answer and no answer to all. You go back to your mending. Outside the window, the afternoon light is moving toward the golden quality that means 4 o'clock, and the end of the workday approaching, and your mother walking back up the hill from the terraces. Your hands work. The needle goes in and comes out. In. Out. The seam closes. October. The rains come in October. The first rain is just a few hours, a grey sky that opens in the afternoon and drops water on the village for 2 hours and stops. But after the 6 months of dry you've been living through, 2 hours of rain sounds like something trying to make a point. The sound of it on the stone. Everywhere. Every surface of the village becoming a drum, a different pitch. For the roof tiles versus the street stones versus the wooden shutters. You open the shutter and put your arm out the window, and the rain falls on your forearm and runs down your elbow and falls off your elbow into the vicolo below. The smell. This is the smell you've been waiting for since April. The smell of rain on dry stone, of water on baked earth, of the particular complex chemistry of a landscape being rehydrated. It is, you cannot help it, one of the best smells in the world. Not better than the bread, not better than the almond paste, but of a different category entirely. The smell of something happening, the smell of the equation being corrected. Your grandmother is at the door with a bucket. The drain, she says, you know. The drain from the roof feeds the cistern. The first rains carry the summer's dust and debris, and the first minutes of it, the grey-brown initial flow, need to be diverted before the clean water gets through. You hold the bucket under the drain spout while your grandmother watches, and when the colour of what's coming off the roof shifts from brown to clear, she nods, and you move the bucket, and the clean water goes into the cistern below. Cold. It hits the back of your hands when you shift the bucket, and it's cold and clean, and you hold your hands under it for a second, and your grandmother does not tell you to stop. That night the cistern is half full, a different kind of night. The 3 of you in the room, the rain audible on the roof, the fire burning, the bean soup hot. A kind of ease in the room that hasn't been there since March, since before the rationing started. Your mother reads the letter from Calogero. The letter has been waiting for 3 weeks. It arrived at the post office and your mother collected it. But the timing of reading it aloud, of giving it the attention it requires, had not been right until now. She reads it aloud. He is well. His wife is well. The children are well. He sends money with this letter, the postal order, its amount modest by New York standards and significant here. He says the construction is still going. Though he's heard rumours of difficulties, something is happening with the economy, men being nervous, prices of things going up and then going down in ways that don't make sense. He doesn't fully understand it. Nobody fully understands it. But something is coming. He can feel it. He says, if you want to send the girl, send her soon, before the laws change more. I will make arrangements. Your mother stops reading. She folds the letter, puts it in the box. For a moment the room contains only the fire, the rain, the three of you. Mama, your mother says, to your grandmother, not to you. Your grandmother is looking at the fire. She's 14, your grandmother says. She'll be 15 in the spring. That's still 14. 15 is old enough to. I know what 15 is old enough for, your grandmother says. Her voice is quiet, not angry, just final. I was married at 15, a pause. I was a widow by 40. I was alone at 43 when my son left for America, and you left for the mines behind your husband. She looks at the fire. What I'm saying is, I know what 15 is old enough for. The fire settles, a small collapse of coals, a brief bright flare. Mama, your mother says again softly. I know, your grandmother says. They're not talking about you anymore. They're talking to each other in the way that mothers and daughters talk to each other in this room, in the compressed language of people who've been sharing space and worry and work for 23 years. You're in the room. You're present. You're also somehow not the subject, or not only the subject of this. I'll think about it, your grandmother says. Your mother nods. The conversation is over. The letter arrives in November. Not from New York. From the government. A white envelope with an official seal, collected from the post office by your mother, who carries it home in her apron pocket and holds it in her hands for a long moment before putting it on the table. The three of you look at it. Your grandmother opens it. She holds it up to the window. The light from the one window, the north light, the thin November light. Her eyes moving across the lines of official text. She reads Italian when she has to. She learned it the way most of her generation learned it. Late, grudgingly, from necessity. The language of the government being different from the language of the house. She sets it down on the table. The girl must attend school, she says. A pause. The fascist school, she says. Not differently from how she said the first part. The same tone, the same flatness. Information. The government has instituted mandatory attendance for all children through the age of 16. The school in the village, which has always been somewhat notional, children attending when they were not needed elsewhere, attendance tolerated rather than enforced, is now going to be properly enforced. A new teacher has been assigned. The curriculum has been updated. The curriculum includes instruction in the fascist youth organisations, the Balilla for boys, the Piccola Italian for girls. Your grandmother folds the letter, sets it on top of the cigar box with the letters from America. Well, your mother says. Well, your grandmother agrees. The school. The schoolroom is on the ground floor of the municipal building, the largest building in the village other than the church. It has 3 windows, more than your house, and a blackboard that was new 6 years ago and is now faded at the centre from use. The teacher is new. His name is Signor Ferraro. He's perhaps 25, from somewhere in the north. Liguria, he says, with a slightly different Italian that marks him as not from here, the way the smell of different stone marks a different house. He is not fascist in the threatening way. He is fascist in the way that young men who want government jobs are fascist, as a professional matter. He does what is required and does not seem to enjoy or dislike it particularly. The students are mostly girls, mostly your age or slightly younger, because the boys of 14 and 15 are more reliably needed in the fields, and the mines and their absence from school is more reliably overlooked. The instruction includes reading, writing, arithmetic. This part is useful, and you do it with attention. your pen moving across the paper in the careful, large letters you learned at 8 and are now relearning at 14, the muscle memory imperfect but present. The arithmetic reveals something. Numbers have always made a certain kind of sense to you, the logic of them, the way they don't change depending on who's looking. In the first week, Signor Ferraro gives a word problem involving the division of a harvest, and you have the answer before he finishes writing it on the board. He looks at you. "You've studied before," he says. "Not for years," you say. He looks at you a moment longer, files something away. The other part of the instruction is the piccolo Italian. The meetings are on Thursdays after school. You put on the uniform, a white blouse, a black skirt, a kerchief, and you sit in rows and you're instructed in the duties of the Italian woman, which in fascist Italy means bearing children, managing the household, supporting the nation, being modest and obedient and physically healthy and morally pure. You listen. You write down what is required. You do not express opinions. This is not cowardice. This is the strategy your grandmother has been practicing for 60 years and has transmitted to your mother and through your mother to you. Do what is required. Say what is required. Hold your actual thoughts in the part of you that is not visible. Your hands on the desk, your face still. After school, you walk home through this vicolo, through this narrow passage that smells of old stone and someone's evening fire and the last of the rosemary from someone's garden. You open the door, your grandmother is in a chair. "How was school?" she asks. "Fine," you say. She nods. This is the right answer. Fine means attended, complied, caused no trouble, came home. Everything else is irrelevant. December. Your first Christmas in the school changes things. Signor Ferraro assigns a composition. 2 pages. Subject: my family. You have never been asked to write about your family. You've been asked to write words, sentences, copies of texts from the board. Never your family. You sit with the composition paper at the table, in the light from the window, and you think. Your hands around the pen. You think about what to write. Not in the school sense. The official answer, the piccolo Italiane answer. My family as a unit of the Italian nation. The language that will satisfy Signor Ferraro and the curriculum and whoever else might read this composition. You think about the real answer, which is 3 women in one room with 1 window and 1 cistern, and 60 years of work between them, and a box of letters from America, and a photograph on a shelf, and a pair of hands mending the same sock for the 4th time. You write both somehow. You write about the household, the work. You describe the water, the fountain, the cistern, the spring in July, without making it a complaint. You describe the bread without sentimentality. You describe your grandmother's hands. This last part you do carefully, not in the official language, in your own. Her hands can do anything, you write. Not because they are strong, though they are. Because they do not stop. You look at what you've written. You cross out. Her hands can do anything, and write. Her hands have never stopped working. Then you cross that out and write the first version back. You bring the composition to school on Monday. Signor Ferraro reads the class compositions over the course of the week, calling students to discuss them. When he calls you, he has your pages in front of him, and he's put a mark on one section. The section about your grandmother's hands. "This sentence," he says. "What did you mean?" You think about the various ways to answer. You say, "She knows how to do everything because she's been doing everything for 60 years. Signor Ferraro looks at you. That's not what you wrote, he says. No. What you wrote is better. He taps the page. Write more like that. This is the first time in your educational life that someone has told you to write more like yourself. You don't know what to do with this. You walk home with it in your chest, this small thing, turning it over. Your grandmother is at the fire. Nonna, you say. My teacher said I write well. A pause. Of course you do, she says. She says it the way she says everything, as information, as fact, as the natural consequence of observable conditions, not as praise, as acknowledgement. You sit down, you pick up your mending, the fire, the stone, the winter settling in outside the window. January. The winter in Sicily is not the winter of the north. Your uncle's New York winters, the snow, the shoveling, the pipes freezing, belong to a different world. But January in the stone house is still cold enough to matter. Cold enough that getting out of bed is a small act of will every morning. Cold enough that the jug of water you brought up last evening has a film of ice on the surface by morning, just at the very top, a thin disk of cold that you break with your finger before you pour. Your grandmother sleeps with her coat on top of the blanket now. She's done this every January as long as you can remember. The coat is black wool, heavy, missing 2 buttons, replaced with different buttons that don't quite match. She mended it so many times the original wool is mostly in the places between men's. In the morning she moves more slowly. You notice this and say nothing. To say something would be to name it, and naming it would make it real in a different way. But you watch. Her hands are still. The mending is still precise. The olives in the jar are perfectly salted. She knows the bread is ready 3 minutes before it is every time. But in the mornings she stays in her chair longer before she gets up. And when she gets up there is a sound. Barely, almost not there. A sound in her knees or her hips. A small sound of protest from a body that has been at work for 70 years. You bring her coffee in the morning now. This is a new arrangement starting in November. Not discussed, simply begun. You make the coffee. Real coffee when there is real coffee, chicory when there isn't, which is more often, and you bring it to her before she gets up, and she wraps her hands around the cup and drinks it, and the small sound of her mourning is the sound of the cup on the stone beside her chair. You don't have to do that, she says, the first morning you do it. I know, you say. She doesn't say, don't do it. February. Signor Ferraro gives another assignment. This one is different. Not a composition, an arithmetic problem, but presented in a particular way. There is a family, he says. 3 people. 1 person earns 20 lire a week. The rent is 5 lire a week. Bread costs 1 lira for 2 kilos. Olive oil costs 2 lire a litre. How much is left for other things? The problem is simple. You do it in your head before he finishes writing it on the board. 20 minus 5 minus 1 minus 2. 12 lire. But Signor Ferraro keeps going. Wood costs 3 lire a month. Clothing costs approximately 5 lire a month. A doctor, when needed, cost 8 lire per visit. He pauses. How many months can this family go before they cannot pay for a doctor's visit without reducing their food? This is not the kind of arithmetic that is usually taught in Italian schools. The room is quiet. You write the calculation, then write it again with the doctor's visit as a given. The answer is 2 months. After 2 months, if nothing changes, they cannot afford a doctor's visit without eating less. Signor Ferraro collects the papers. He reads them over the following week with unusual attention. The following Thursday he keeps you after the Piccoli Italian meeting. You stand in front of his desk. He puts your paper in front of you. You added a variable, he says. He points to a line in your calculation. What's this? Water, you say. In August we have to fetch from the spring. That costs time, not money, but time costs. My mother could have been in the fields instead of at the spring. So I tried to calculate the days of harvest income lost against the water cost. He looks at you. How old are you? 14, almost 15. Where did you learn to think like this? Nowhere, you say. Then, from watching. He taps the paper twice, sets it down, looks out the window which faces east, which unlike your window at home gets the morning sun. There's a school in Palermo, he says, for girls, state scholarship, competitive. He looks at you. Do you know what a competitive exam is? You take a test with many other people and the best ones get the scholarship. Yes. He picks up the paper again. I can prepare you for it, if you want. If your family... He pauses. It would mean leaving the village. Living in Palermo. The room is very still. Palermo, you say. It's not. He stops, starts again. It's not America, but it's a different life, a different kind of future. The word he uses, futuro, future. The same word your mother used. You think about the stone house, the one window, the cistern. You think about your grandmother's hands. I'll ask my family, you say. That evening. You wait until after supper, after the cleaning, after the evening routine, the sweeping, the fire checked, the water level noted. Your mother is mending. Nonna is mending. You're sitting on the edge of your bed, which is your thinking place when you have something to think that is too large for the table. I have something to tell you, you say. They both look at you. You tell them. The school in Palermo, the exam, Signor Ferraro, what it would mean. When you finish, the room is the same quiet it was after your mother finished reading Calogero's letter. Your mother puts down her mending. She looks at your grandmother. Your grandmother has not stopped mending. Palermo, your mother says, not as a question or a statement, as a geography being examined. It's not as far as America, you say. It's not as far, your mother agrees. A pause. Your grandmother pulls the thread through, looks at the work. The exam, she says. When? In April. She nods. Another silence. The scholarship, she says. What does it pay? Ferraro said room and board and tuition. Everything. Everything. Yes. Your grandmother bites the thread, sets down the sock, picks up the shirt that has been waiting for 2 weeks, the sleeve with the small tear that is now a larger tear. If you pass the exam, she says, if I pass. She examines the tear, begins to mend. Then study, she says. That's all, that's everything. March, study. Signor Ferraro stays after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You stay with him. The other students go home. You stay. He goes through the examination curriculum, Italian grammar, Italian history, arithmetic, geography, and what he calls civic education, which means the government and its principles and the official version of what Italy is and where it is going. You learn the official version. You write it on practice papers in the clear, correct Italian that Ferraro corrects and refines. And then, sometimes, when the lesson is going in a different direction, when Ferraro closes the official textbook and opens something else, a book of problems, a map, a sheet of numbers, you get the other kind of lesson, the kind where he asks you to think. There's a village, he says one afternoon, running his finger along a map of the interior. 300 people, one water source. The source produces 40 litres per hour. How long does it take to serve the village's basic needs if each person requires... He stops. What do you think each person needs per day? You think about the measuring stick, about the notches. 8 to 10 litres per day, you say, for drinking, cooking, basic hygiene. He raises his eyebrows. Per person? Per person, more in summer. He looks at you. How do you know that? We have a cistern, you say. I check it every day. He marks something in his notebook. 60 litres per hour, he says. An improvement. Continue. The arithmetic is not hard, but the way he frames it, as a problem of real things, real water, real people, makes it different from the arithmetic on the official tests. That arithmetic is about trains and merchants and abstract quantities. This arithmetic is about a village with one window and one water source and 300 people who need 8 litres each. You understand this arithmetic from the body, and because you understand it from the body, you're faster at it than anyone else in the room. April. The rain comes again, and the exam. The exam takes place in the town in the valley. The first time you've been to the town in 2 years. The first time you've travelled this far from the village without your mother. You go with Signor Ferraro, who takes you by the cart of the man who goes to the valley market on Thursdays, sitting in the back on the wooden boards, your bag in your lap, watching the village get smaller and then disappear behind the curve of the road. The valley is different from the village, wider, flatter, more noise. The town has perhaps 2,000 people, which is 6 times your village, which means 6 times the overlapping sounds of 6 times the lives. The examination hall is in the school building. Long tables, white paper, the smell of new ink and old wood. You sit down, you put your bag under the chair, you look at the paper when it comes, you begin. The exam takes 3 hours. You know, midway through, that you're doing well. Not because of confidence, you have not had enough experience with exams to be confident, but because the questions feel familiar, not from studying, but from the kind of thinking you've been doing your whole life, the kind where you look at a thing and measure it and figure out what it needs and what it's missing. Italian grammar. Clean. The essay question asks you to describe a place you know well. You describe the cistern. Not the technical description. You don't describe its dimensions or its engineering. You describe the measuring stick with its notches. You describe the sound of the water filling it in October. You describe what 3 notches from the bottom means for a family of 3 women over a period of 6 weeks. You write. Water teaches you what is real. When you have too much of it, you think other things matter more. When you have the right amount of it, you understand everything has exactly the importance it has. You look at this sentence for a long moment. You leave it in. The arithmetic is straightforward. The geography you've studied. The map work, the distances, the shapes of the regions. The history you've memorized in the official language and written in it cleanly. You walk out at the end of 3 hours. Ferraro is waiting outside. How was it? He asks. Fine, you say. He looks at you. Really? Yes. A pause. The afternoon sun on the square. The noise of the town around you. Good, he says. We'll know in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. The weeks pass in their rhythms. The water. The mending. The school. The Piccolo Italian meeting. The Thursday afternoons in the uniform. The official language. The hands. Folded. Your grandmother's mornings slow a little more. You begin doing more. Small additions to what you've always done. The extra sweep at the end of the day. The second check of the cistern without being asked. The coffee always ready before she gets up. The kindling for the fire laid the night before. She says nothing about this. She mends. She shapes the bread. She salts the olives. But she lets you do the additional things. And this, you understand, is its own form of instruction. One evening in May, the evening after a day of light rain that refilled the cistern to the halfway mark, she calls you to sit beside her. Not unusual, but the way she calls you, quietly, with a particular intention, is unusual. You sit. Her hands for once are empty, in her lap, not working. When I was your age, she says, I thought the house was the world. You wait. Then I was married and the world was the house and the husband and the children. That was the world. The fire. When the children grew up and left, your uncle to America, your mother following your father to the mines, I thought the world had gone away. She looks at her hands. But the house stayed. The house is always here. A pause. Nonna. I'm not finished. You close your mouth. The house will be here when you go. She looks at you. Direct. Her eyes have the particular clarity of old eyes that are not clouded. I'm not saying this to make you sad. I'm saying it so you know. You can leave and it will still be here. I will still be here. Your mother will still be here. We don't end when you go. She picks up the sock, resumes mending. Your hands, she says, are your own. Remember that. You've heard this before, but this time it sounds different. This time it sounds like permission. The letter comes in June, a white envelope, official seal, but different from the last white envelope. Your mother brings it from the post office with both hands, which is how she carries things that are heavy in ways that have nothing to do with weight. Your grandmother takes it, reads it, sets it on the table. You look at her face and you know before she speaks. You passed, she says. The weeks between the letter and the departure. There are things to do, practical things. The arrangement of the scholarship payment, the communication with the school in Palermo, the timing. Signor Ferraro helps with the letters, with the navigation of the official forms, and then the preparations. Your mother takes the money your uncle sent in May, kept in the chest, not used, waiting, and she goes to the town in the valley and she comes back with fabric. Not the cheapest fabric, not the most expensive, the right fabric for the occasion. 2 dresses. She makes them herself, cutting and pinning on the table, the one window letting in the afternoon light that she angles the fabric toward, checking the seams. You watch her hands on the fabric. You think about the bolts of fabric in your uncle's letters, in his descriptions of New York, the colours available, the abundance. Your mother is working with 2 meters of dark blue wool and 2 meters of grey cotton, and she is making them into something that will hold its shape and represent you well and last through enough seasons to be worth what she paid. Her hands know what they're doing. You say, Mama. She looks up from the pinning. Thank you, you say. She looks at you for a moment. You did the work, she says, and goes back to the pinning. Your grandmother, from her chair. The hem on the blue one needs to be a centimetre higher. She'll grow. Your mother looks at the hem, adjusts a pin. 2 days before you leave, a Sunday. You go to the terrace below the village, not to work, not for any reason that can be explained. You sit on the dry stone wall above the almond trees. The almonds are small and green still, months from harvest. The leaves are the silver green that almond leaves are in early summer, flipping in the slight breeze, showing their pale undersides and then their darker tops flickering. Below you, the valley, the dry riverbed, the terraces. The same view you've been seeing your whole life, from this height, from this angle. You look at it for a long time. You look at it the way you look at things you're about to stop being able to see whenever you want. The way your grandmother looks at her hands when she thinks you're not watching. The stone under you is warm from the morning sun. The air smells of wild oregano and something dusty, and the particular something of this place, this specific square kilometre of hillside that has no name because it is simply the smell of here. You put your hand flat on the stone, the warmth of it, the roughness, the slightly abraded surface of limestone that has been weather for 10,000 years and will continue to weather for 10,000 more. The house will still be here. You stay until the church bell rings noon. Then you go home, the last night. Your things are packed. Not many things. The 2 dresses your mother made, 2 changes of underclothing, the composition book that Ferraro gave you. Empty, for Palermo, he said. Handkerchief, a photograph. Small, slightly out of focus. The 3 of you in front of the house, taken by the travelling photographer who comes to the village every spring. In the photograph, your grandmother is sitting because the photographer offered her a chair and she took it without comment. Your mother is standing on her left. You're standing on her right. Your grandmother's hands, in the photograph, are in her lap. Still, the packing takes 10 minutes. Then you sit on the edge of your bed and there's nothing more to do. The evening passes slowly. Supper is better than usual. Not feast day food. There are no almonds or honey or the elaborate sweetness of the feast. But your mother made the pasta, the baked kind, the good kind, the kind that appears on ordinary days only in theory. You eat it at the table, the 3 of you. The table is clear for once. The salt box and oil flask move to the shelf. The composition book packed in your bag. Even the cigar box with the letters has been moved temporarily to the shelf beside the photograph. A table that is only a table. You eat. You don't talk much. This is not a sad silence. It's the silence of people who've been in the same room for so long that silence between them is not empty. It's full of everything that doesn't need to be said because it has already been understood. After supper, your mother washes the plates. Your grandmother goes to the chest at the foot of her bed. She opens it. From the bottom, below the folded things, below the documents, below the things that have been in this chest for as long as the chest has been in this house, she takes out a cloth. She unfolds it on the table. Inside, a comb. Ivory, or what was ivory once. Yellowed now, smooth, with teeth that have a barely perceptible give when you press them. Old, very old. My mother's, she says. Her mother gave it to her. She holds it in her palm and looks at it, and you see her looking at all the women who held it before you, and you feel the weight of that without it being explained. It's for you. You take it. The weight of it is surprising, heavier than something this size should be, heavier with the weight of being held many times by many hands. The surface is smooth in a way that smooth things only get from decades of contact with human skin. You hold it. You don't say anything. Your grandmother covers your hands with hers. That grip, still strong, still certain. In Palermo, she says, use your mind. It's the only thing that belongs entirely to you. She releases your hands. She goes to her bed. And that is the instruction. The morning you leave, the bell rings at 5. You open your eyes. For a half second you have no idea where you are. Then the smell, smoke, old wool, your grandmother. The familiar overlay of this stone room, these 60 centimetres of wall, this one window. For the last time, this particular morning. You get up. The floor is cold. The cold comes up through your feet and into your legs, and you stand in it for a moment longer than usual. The basin, the water, the cloth. Your mother is already at the fire making the coffee. Her back to you, her movements the same as they have been every morning of your life. Your grandmother is in her chair. Her hands are already moving. Of course they are. You bring her coffee, wrap her hands around the cup. She doesn't say thank you, she doesn't need to. The slight tightening of her fingers around the cup, around your hands beneath the cup, is the thing. You drink your coffee standing by the window, outside the vicolo, the grey stone walls, the DiMaggio children, one of them, the boy, up early, crossing the narrow space with some object in his hands. The strip of sky above the houses dark still but lightening at the eastern edge, a dark blue shifting toward grey. You have been looking at this for 14 years. You fix it. The smell of the smoke and the coffee and the bread your mother is now cutting. The sound of the needle pulling through cloth. The cold from the floor. The weight of the ivory comb in your dress pocket, where you put it last night before sleeping. You fix it all. Signor Ferraro comes at 7. He'll take you to the cart that goes to the valley, and from the valley to the train, and the train to Palermo. Your mother embraces you at the door. She does not cry. She is not a woman who cries at things that need to be done. She holds you for longer than usual. Her arms, strong from the fields, from the carrying, from 6 years of alone, close around you, and you feel the particular warmth of a body that has been working in cold rooms for a long time, a warmth that is hard-earned and genuine. She releases you, straightens your collar. Right, she says. Every week, you say. She nods once. Your grandmother has not moved from her chair. You go to her. You kneel beside her chair, the stone floor cold through your dress, and you take both of her hands in yours. Her hands, the knuckles, the thin papery skin, the extraordinary hardness of the palms, every small scar and mark and the particular set of the fingers from decades of mending, slightly curved, slightly inward, the shape of hands that have been working so long they remember it even at rest. You hold them. She looks at you. Go, she says. One word. Not cruel, not dismissive. The word of a woman who has watched everything she loved leave, and come back and leave again, and who understands that going is not abandoning, that the stone house is still the stone house whether you are in it or not. You stand. You pick up your bag. At the door you turn and look back. The room, the fire, the 2 beds, the table, the shelf with the photograph. Your mother by the fire, already turning back to the work of the day, because the day requires it, and this is how the day has always worked. Your grandmother in her chair, her hands already moving, the needle in, the needle out, the seam closes, the road down the mountain. Ferraro carries your bag for the steep part, which is unnecessary but kind. You don't need the help, but you let him carry it. The path, the same path you took to the spring in August, the same limestone cut into switchbacks, the same scrub plants in the crevices, goes down ahead of you. At the turn where you stopped in August, the view opens. You stop again. Ferraro stops beside you. Below, the village on its ridge, the terraces, the dry riverbed, beginning to fill now with the autumn rains, a thin line of water visible even from here, the valley floor, green where it can be green, pale grey where the limestone breaks through. Above the village, the mountains, the sky above the mountains, the October sky, clear and high and very blue, the blue that happens after summer finally releases its grip and before winter has gathered itself, is the clearest sky you've seen in months. You look at your house. You can't see it from here. It's on the north side of the ridge, facing away from you, but you know exactly where it is. The vicolo, the one window, the cistern below the floor, your grandmother in her chair, the needle going in and coming out. You turn away. You walk down the path. Palermo is enormous. This is obvious before you've arrived. The train itself is more activity than you've experienced in months. The packed compartments, the noise, the smell of 100 different people. But arriving in Palermo is a different kind of enormous. The station, the streets outside the station, the buildings, taller than anything in your experience, 4 and 5 stories, shuttered windows in rows, the ornate stonework of facades that are trying to say something about the people inside. The noise. This is what you notice first, or what you notice most. The noise that is not the noise of the village, the church bells, the children in the vicolo, the sound of the fountain, but the noise of a city that does not slow down, that does not have a noon rest and an evening rest and a Sunday rest, that runs at its own rhythm, which is denser and more complex and louder than anything you've prepared for. The smell. 100 smells overlaid, and underneath all of them the salt of the sea. Closer here than it has ever been to your nose. A smell you've only had in fragments on the right wind, and now you're inside it. It's everywhere. Ferraro takes you to the school, introduces you to the administrator, a woman in her 40s with efficient movements and a precise way of speaking, and then he leaves. You stand in the entrance hall of the school with your bag at your feet and the comb in your pocket and the composition book under your arm, and you're completely alone in a city of hundreds of thousands of people, and you are 14 years old. For a half second, just a half second. Then it passes. Because the smell of the stone in this entrance hall, old Sicilian stone, limestone from the same formation as the limestone of your village, the same colour and same quality, reaches you and reminds you that the island under your feet is the same island it has always been, and the stone is the stone and the sea is the sea, and you are still you. You pick up your bag. You walk forward. That night, the dormitory, 6 girls to a room. More space than you've ever had. Your own small bed, no one sharing. But the space feels strange. The absence of the breathing of your mother and grandmother at night a presence in itself. You lie on your back and look at the ceiling. White. High. Not vaulted. Flat, modern, plastered. The room smells of wax and other girls and something institutional. The smell of meals cooked in large quantities, of floors mopped with the same solution in many rooms. Through the window, and there are 2 windows in this room, 2, which still registers as remarkable, through the windows the sounds of Palermo at night. Very different from the sounds of the village. The village at night was the settling of stone and the church bells and the 3 cats in the alley. Palermo at night is ongoing. Trams, voices, the distant sound of something you can't identify. Music from somewhere. You put your hand on the wall beside your bed. Cold. Stone. Of course stone. The whole island is stone. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your eyes, the room, the fire, your grandmother in the chair, your mother cutting the bread, the one window, the way the light moves through it in October, the angle, the quality, the shadow it casts on the table leg, the measuring stick with its notches, the weight of the water jug when it's full, the almond trees on the terrace, the blossoms in March, the almonds in September, the view from the mountain road, the valley below, the stone village on the ridge, Your grandmother's hands, the needle in, the needle out, the seam closing. Years, the school, the studying, the new rooms in the mind that education opens. Rooms that have always been there, built into the architecture of the intelligence you were born with, but never used because no one had shown you the doors. Mathematics, the room where numbers do what you always felt they should do, reveal the shapes of things. History, the enormous long room where all the stories live, the real ones, the complicated ones, not the version in the Piccolo Italian textbook, but the version that Ferraro showed you was there underneath, visible if you knew how to look. Literature. This one surprises you. You didn't know what to expect from a room full of language, but the room turns out to contain the same things you've been watching your whole life. Hands, stone, water, the relationship between what a life looks like from outside and what it feels like from inside. Only someone has written it down. Someone thought, this is worth preserving. This is worth saying in a form that will last. You think about your grandmother's hands. You write it down. Not in the official Italian, in the Italian that is yours, that carries the cadences of the dialect under it, the way the cistern water carries the taste of the limestone. You write about the house, 3 women, 1 window, the weight of the jug. Your teacher reads it and says, more, the letters. You write home every week. Your composition book fills with drafts, things you want to say, the right way to say them, then the clean copy on proper paper. Your mother writes back, monthly. Her letters are short. She writes the way she speaks, without waste, but dense with information. The cistern is good. The harvest was thin. Donna Camilla is still first at the fountain. Your uncle sent more money. Nonna does not write. She has never written a letter in her life. But sometimes, at the end of your mother's letters, in different handwriting, rounder, slower, the writing of someone who learned late and never often. Your grandmother says you're to eat properly. Or she says the school had better be worth the dress fabric. Or just, she says, good. You read these editions 3 and 4 times. You keep them the year you come home. Christmas, your first year in Palermo. The train back through the interior. The landscape familiar and unfamiliar in the way that landscapes look when you've been away long enough to see them with slightly fresh eyes. The mountains, smaller somehow, or not smaller but more comprehensible. The scale of them now contextualized against the scale of Palermo. The valley, the ridge, the village, the cart up the road, the same limestone, the same scrub plants in the crevices, the vicolo, the door, you open it, the smell, smoke, old wool, your grandmother, the same, entirely the same, your mother at the fire. Already turning, already moving, the particular movement of a woman who's heard footsteps she recognizes coming up the alley. Your grandmother in her chair, her hands still. For the first time in as long as you can remember, still. She looks at you. She looks at you for a long moment. Something moving through her face. Not the surface emotions, not the easily read ones, but the deep ones. The ones that live in the architecture of a face built over 70 years. Come here, she says. You go, you kneel. You take her hands. She covers yours. So, she says. So, you say. A pause. You look thin, she says. I'm fine. Are they feeding you properly? Yes, Nonna. She looks at your hands, her thumbs moving across your palms, the barely there calluses from the pen, the still present ones from the water jug, the composition of your hands now a different map than it was. Student hands, she says, not as a judgment, as an observation. Yes. She looks at you. Those clear eyes. Good, she says, and picks up her mending. Settle in now. The fire is lower. In this house, late at night, the fire burns down to coals that hold their heat for hours, the vaulted ceiling above holding the warmth in the stone giving it back slowly through the night. Your grandmother is asleep, her breath steady, deep, the breath of someone who has earned every minute of rest they take. Your mother is asleep behind the curtain. You are lying on the straw mattress in the bed you know like the map of your own body, the particular give of it, the places where it's thin, the places where it's not. The sounds of the village at night, the church bell in the distance, the cats in the alley, the wind tonight coming from the sea, salt, slight, carrying the smell of water that has travelled a long way to get here. Through the window, always one window, the sky, clear, stars, the same stars that are above Palermo right now, the same stars your Uncle Calogero watches from New York when he goes outside on winter nights, the same stars your grandmother watched from this same stone house for 70 years. Stars don't change, not in one lifetime, not in 3. Let the village sleep. Let the cistern rest in its stone cradle below the floor. Let the fountain in the piazza run quietly in the dark, the water moving through the spout into the basin. The sound of it so constant that it registers as silence. Let the almond trees on the terrace hold their small unripe almonds against the cold night air. Let the cat in the alley find its place against the warm stone. Let the path down the mountain be empty of footsteps, the limestone pale in the starlight, the switchbacks leading down through the scrub, through the oleanders, to the spring that flows from the rock year after year, the cold water that tastes of the mountain, that has no season, that simply is. Your grandmother's hands are still now. Resting on the blanket she pulled up before sleeping, her fingers slightly curved, the shape they know, the shape they've been for 70 years. All the things those hands have made, bread, olives, mended clothes, mended children, the seams of things that fell apart and were closed, all the weight those hands have carried, water, wood, grief, years, all the things those hands have held, your mother as an infant, your father's photograph before it went on the shelf, your hands, your child-sized hands, teaching you without words what hands are for. In Palermo there is a school where a girl with student hands and the smell of old stone still in her memory is sleeping in a room with 2 windows, breathing the faint salt of the sea. She carries the measuring stick in her mind, the notches, the level of what's available and what's needed and the calculation that bridges the 2. She carries the ivory comb. She carries 3 women, 1 room, the cold stone floor, the water that tastes of the mountain. She will carry these things everywhere she goes. You are warm enough, safe enough, resting. The house has been here for 100 years. It will be here for another 100. The spring below the mountain will keep flowing. The almonds will blossom in March. The cistern will fill in October when the rains come. The needle will go in and come out and the seam will close. Let it come. The sleep that comes to 3 women in a stone house with 1 window, let it come to you the same way. Let the sounds fade. The last cart in the vicolo, the last bell from the church at the top of the hill. Let the walls of this room, old stone, cold stone, 60 centimetres thick, stone that has held the heat of 100 summers and the cold of 100 winters, let them be around you, not trapping you, simply there, simply what they are. Let your hands open. Whatever weight you've been carrying today, let it rest. Let it be the water set down at the end of the path, the jug on the floor, the work done. Let the things that need to be done tomorrow wait for tomorrow, because tomorrow will have its own bells and its own light through its own window, and you will be there for it. But tonight, rest. The way your grandmother rests after 70 years of not stopping. The way your mother rests after 6 years of earning what there is to earn. The way all the women who carried water up this hill rest at the end of the day they've been given. Tomorrow the cistern will need checking. Tomorrow the bread will need making. Tomorrow the seam that split today will need mending. The same as today, the same as yesterday, the same as all the mornings stretching back further than memory, back to the first woman who put her hands on this stone and said, "Here, this is where we live." But that's tomorrow. Tonight, the stars. Tonight, the sound of the spring running in the dark at the base of the mountain. Tonight, the 3 women breathing, still. Centuries will pass. The stone house will be renovated into a holiday rental. Its one window replaced with something larger. The view of the valley described in an online listing as authentic Sicilian charm. Someone will lay terracotta tiles over the old stone floor and not know what's underneath. The cistern will be sealed and forgotten. The measuring stick with its notches will be thrown away by someone who doesn't know what it is. But the almond trees on the terrace will still blossom in March. The limestone of the mountain will still be limestone. The spring will still come out of the rock cold and mineral tasting into a basin that someone eventually will restore. And somewhere a woman will hold an old ivory comb, found in a box, origin unknown, and feel, without being able to say why, the weight of it, the weight of all the hands. Let sleep take you the way it took 3 women in a stone room on a ridge in Sicily 100 years ago, when the day's work was done and the fire was low and the water level in the cistern was known, and the door was bolted and the window was shuttered and there was nothing left to do but rest. Let the weight set down. Let the hands open. Let the sounds of the world, whatever world is outside your window tonight, become the background they always were, before you noticed them. Let your body remember that it knows how to do this. It has done it every night of your life. Let the thoughts slow, then soften, then stop. Good night.